I used to live in a neighborhood across the street from a graveyard. Strange things have occurred throughout my life, even when I didn't live in that neighborhood. However, when I did live there, things happened more frequently than normal. I lived with my stepdad, my mum, my biological sister, and some step-siblings at the time. My stepbrother and I shared a room. We were in the 3rd grade. We slept in a bunk bed, and I slept on the top bunk. One night when we were going to bed, I heard something that made my eyes open wide. Our closet door, which was straight ahead beyond the foot of our bed, slowly crept open, making a haunting, almost vocal sound. I remember not knowing if my stepbrother was asleep in the bottom bunk, so I whisper yelled, "Zone!" I then tried a bit louder. "Zone! Did you hear that?" I heard my brother make a horrible gasp, the kind of gasp someone makes when they see something terrible. I looked into the closet and saw 2 green eyes staring at me, and then at Zone. The 2 horrible eyes were hanging above a green, toothy grin. It kind of reminded me of the eyes and smile of the Cheshire Cat from Alice in Wonderland. It gave me goosebumps and made my eyes water. I wasn't sure what specifically it was that caused this reaction. As terrifying as it was, I threw my Spider-Man body pillow at it. My brother had one just like it. I know it was a pretty stupid move, but I was a kid and didn't have a clue how to handle the situation. The door nearly closed because of my excellent throw. However, it didn't latch closed. It was still barely open. After my brother and I sat in silence for a second, I asked him, "Did you see that?" He said, "Yeah. One of us has to go and get your mom and my..." Right when he was about to finish his sentence, the door to the closet started to open again. The high-pitched noise was even louder and slower than before. We were both horrified when we saw it again. The door revealed its glowing green face once more, still giving an ear-to-ear sickly green smile. This time though, Zone threw his Spider-Man body pillow at the door. The door squeaked and almost closed again. We watched it for about a minute. Then, it started to creep open a 3rd time. I don't know what came over me, but I said, "F this," and ran as fast as I could down the long hallway to my mum's room. I yelled and woke them up. My stepdad went into the room and switched the lights on. He opened the closet door and turned on the closet light. There was nothing there. My brother and I were yelling and babbling, trying to convince him of what we saw, but he didn't care. He tried to say it was the crappy fake glow-in-the-dark vampire teeth in the closet, but my brother and I both knew it was more than that. Even if that explained the face, it wouldn't explain the door opening on its own several times. Everything went back to normal for a while, except for when I woke up with a nosebleed a few mornings in a row. The next summer, I had to take summer school in a town not too far away. It sucked. I didn't know anyone. One day, everyone was sitting in the cafeteria area to watch a dumb play. It was Peter Pan. I started talking to a kid next to me. We seemed like we had a connection, like maybe we could be friends and hang out sometime. I told him about the green-faced thing. I think maybe because the play reminded me of that night. The kid's face went blank. He looked like a deer in headlights. He started speaking Spanish. Then his eyes started tearing up, and in a nervous whisper, he said,
"That is Azazel. He's a demon."
A part of me felt bad for leaving my brother in the same room with that thing, but if I didn't, I don't know what would have happened. I have many more stories of true supernatural experiences. I'll have to share more. Thank you for reading. P.S. There are things out there in reality. If you know someone who says they've experienced something, please be there for them. It's hard to cope with these experiences, especially when you have to, all by yourself.
Of some skin.
This happened about 5 years ago when I was going through hard times and was homeless. I used to live in Denver, Colorado, which is where this took place. There are several cemeteries in the Denver area, but there's one on the outskirts of Denver which is very large and very old. I think it may be the oldest one that's still being actively used. Before I became homeless, I didn't know much about this area. I had always gotten a creepy feeling around there, but I didn't know why until I was on the streets. I heard from many different people that it's got lots of underground tunnels and some homeless people live in these tunnels. But in the deeper tunnels, there is cult activity. These tunnels have secret entrances all over the area, and the homeless that live around this area avoid some of these spider holes because people have been known to disappear near them, mostly women. This area has a river going through it, alongside the graveyard. One side of the river has a darker feel than the other. It's eerie over there and smells like death. One time, I was wandering the area with a few other acquaintances. Safety in numbers and all that. We had nowhere to go and decided to hang out in the abandoned part of the graveyard, the older side. It had just gotten dark, and it was windy. It was also fall, so it was cold. We were huddled up against gravestones to block the wind. One of the people I was with knew the area better than I did, and he had warned me to be very vigilant. I figured this was so we didn't attract the attention of security, police, or fellow homeless, but I later found out why he was so anxious about the area. It was probably around 10 p.m. We had all been just sitting in silence, trying to stay warm, hoping the night would pass quickly, when I heard my acquaintance, let's call him Jay, whisper, "Hey, heads up, keep quiet." I had already been quiet, but I immediately tensed up, assuming that he spotted security or something. But as I looked around, I saw in the distance some small flickering lights appearing here and there all around the graveyard. It was like people had been spread all around the large graveyard, and they were all holding lighters that they flicked on, which only then showed that they were all over. After my eyes adjusted a bit, I recognized they seemed to be candles. I looked harder and could sort of see the outlines of people holding these candles. Jay whispered, "We gotta go." We clumsily started grabbing the few items that we had around us. Jay came right up next to me and said, "Follow me, and don't look at them." I was thinking, WTF? My other friend and I quickly started following Jay, moving at a quick walk straight to the break in the fence where we had come in. I was stupid enough to look behind me and saw the light/figures continue to appear all around us, and they were walking to the middle of the graveyard to stand in a circle. I passed by a few and saw out of the corner of my eye they were wearing black cloaks. I could feel the menacing presence and stares, like they were daring me to look at them. But I had an overwhelming feeling that if we left them alone, they would leave us alone. One thing that haunted me afterward was the way they seemed to move towards the middle. They moved quickly and smoothly, like they were gliding. A stereotype I know, and just seemed to morph out of the darkness. My instincts were on high alert. I knew whoever they were pure evil. We got the heck out of there, and once we got to the fence, we full-on sprinted for a few blocks. Jay didn't explain much. He just said to avoid those people and don't look them in the eye, or they could have power over you. I definitely had gotten that feeling from the encounter. I asked why they weren't scared of cops or security, and he said basically that they got away with what they did because the authorities didn't want to risk looking into it, because they didn't want to be targeted. I don't know how true this is, but I do know what I saw and felt. I had several scary experiences during my time in Denver, and some other stories about this area, so you guys let me know if you want more background, or want to hear about the other things I've experienced, or heard about this area.
World of cemeteries.
Jake and I had been best friends since high school. We both loved horror movies and creepy urban legends, often staying up late and talking about the scariest places in our town. So, when we heard about the old graveyard on the outskirts, we decided to visit. It was supposed to be one of the most haunted places around, with countless stories of strange noises and ghost sightings. It was a chilly October night, and the moon was hidden behind thick clouds. The perfect night for a spooky adventure. We parked my beat-up car at the entrance and hopped over the rusty gate. The graveyard looked even more eerie than I had imagined. Tombstones were scattered haphazardly, some tilted at odd angles, others broken and covered in moss. Tall trees surrounded the place, their branches swaying gently in the breeze, casting long shadows on the ground.
"Man, this place is super creepy,"
Jake whispered, trying to sound brave but failing miserably.
"Yeah, but that's why we're here, right?"
I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. We walked deeper into the graveyard, our flashlights cutting through the darkness. Every sound seemed amplified. The crunch of leaves under our feet, the rustling of the wind through the trees, and our own breathing, which grew heavier with each step. I tried to remember the stories I had heard about this place. The phantom woman who wandered the paths at night, the ghostly whispers, the flickering lights. It all seemed so silly in the daylight. But now, in the pitch-black night, it felt all too real. We stopped at an especially old-looking tombstone, the name and dates almost completely worn away. I shined my flashlight on it, trying to make out the engraving.
"Hey, check this out,"
Jake said suddenly, pointing to a large gnarled tree nearby.
"There's a hole in the trunk. Looks like it could be a hiding spot for something."
We walked over to the tree, our curiosity piqued. The hole was just big enough for a small animal, or, as I half-jokingly suggested, a ghostly hand to reach out and grab us. Jake chuckled, but I could see he was just as nervous as I was. He reached into the hole, feeling around.
"Nothing in here but dirt and leaves,"
he said, pulling his hand back out. We continued exploring, but as the night went on, the unease in my stomach grew stronger. It wasn't just the graveyard itself, it was the feeling of being watched. I kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see someone or something lurking in the shadows. After about an hour, we decided to head back. We started to make our way towards the entrance, but the graveyard seemed different. The path we had taken earlier now looked unfamiliar, and the trees seemed to have shifted. I told myself it was just my imagination, but Jake seemed uneasy too.
"Did we come this way?"
he asked, looking around.
"I thought so,"
I said, trying to sound confident.
"Maybe we just took a wrong turn. Let's keep going."
But no matter which direction we went, we couldn't find the gate. The graveyard seemed to stretch on forever, the tombstones blending together in the darkness. Panic began to set in. I checked my phone, hoping to use the GPS, but there was no signal. Typical.
"Let's just stay calm,"
I said, more to reassure myself than Jake.
"We'll find our way out, we just need to think."
We walked for what felt like hours, the cold seeping into our bones. Then, we heard it. A soft, almost imperceptible whisper. At first, I thought it was the wind, but the whisper grew louder, more distinct. It was coming from behind us.
"Did you hear that?"
Jake asked, his voice shaking.
"Yeah,"
I replied, my heart pounding in my chest.
"Let's keep moving."
We quickened our pace, but the whisper followed us, growing closer. I dared to glance back and saw nothing but darkness. The whisper turned into a low moan, sending chills down my spine. Suddenly, Jake stopped dead in his tracks.
"Look!"
he shouted, pointing ahead. In the distance, I saw a faint light, Relief washed over me. Maybe it was another entrance, or someone who could help us. We hurried towards the light, stumbling over roots and gravestones in our haste. As we got closer, the light grew brighter, revealing a small clearing. In the center stood a figure, dressed in old-fashioned clothes, holding a lantern. The figure didn't move, didn't make a sound, just stood there, watching us.
Hello?
I called out, my voice trembling. The figure slowly raised its head, and I felt my blood run cold. Its eyes were hollow, empty sockets staring right through us. The lantern flickered, casting eerie shadows on its face.
Run!
Jake shouted, grabbing my arm. We turned and ran, not daring to look back. The whispers turned into shrieks echoing all around us. I could hear footsteps behind us, fast and relentless. My legs burned, my lungs screamed for air, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. Finally, we burst through the trees and saw the gate. We scrambled over it, collapsing on the other side. The graveyard was silent once more, the only sound, our ragged breathing. We didn't say a word as we got into the car and drove away, our minds reeling from what we had just experienced. Neither of us spoke about it again, but the memory of that night haunted us for years.